Okay, video 3, we're going to be talking about the plants. So choosing the plants for a low maintenance tank is pretty easy. Usually you don't have a ton of options just because we're using lower lighting, no CO2, and easy beginner plants. So that's the key. We don't want super hard plants because that's just going to take more of our time up, and the goal of this whole setup is to reduce the amount of time you spend on it. So I think I've narrowed it down to some really great plants, and you don't have to use these exact ones, but I do think these are really good choices if you just want to copy this exact setup. So the most important thing to remember is that you want a lot of plants, no matter what plants you do choose. Get as much as you can because they're gonna do the work for you and clean the water and keep the tank going. Keeping it balanced and natural is key. The whole goal is to make the tank work for you so you do less work. And you can see this tank is just packed with plants, and I keep it that way because it keeps it really balanced. So first plant we'll talk about is the floating plants. I'm going to talk about duckweed because that's the main floating plant that I use. It's the smaller leaf one here. The other one is Amazon frogbit, and there's also that one there, I don't even know. But duckweed is great, like I said in the previous video, because it blocks the light and it allows you to adjust the light. So say you want to grow plants that require more light in the future, just remove the floating plants and you're good. Duckweed is also really interesting because it grows super fast. In fact, I think it's one of the fastest growing plants in the world. You will experience that firsthand when you have it in your tank. You'll be throwing out a lot of this like into your yard and stuff because it just doubles like all the time in size. But that's a good thing, problem to have. And duckweed is also great because it keeps your water clean, absorbs a lot of excess nutrients, and just like I said before, it's going to do the work for you. Next plant we're going to talk about is the Java moss. It's really the centerpiece of this whole tank. It's this huge kind of mound of Java moss here, and it's just sitting on top of a rock in the middle, and you can't even see the rock really, but it's underneath there. Java moss is a really easy plant, really popular. It really doesn't require much at all. Just give it some decent light, a little bit of fertilization, or you really don't have to do anything at all, and it will grow. It does grow pretty slowly, but once it gets going, you can see it has this nice kind of branching off shape that looks really cool. Next plant, Java fern. There are a bunch of varieties of Java fern. In this tank I have needle leaf Java fern and narrow leaf as well. They have thinner leaves than the regular Java fern, so that's why I use them. But you can really go with any of the varieties and you'll be good. It's very similar to the Java moss. You don't really have to do anything. It just kind of grows on its own. You can attach it to driftwood, rocks, whatever. I just kind of throw it in there and it just kind of floats or sits. It's kind of just smushed up against the other plants because I'm lazy and I don't like to spend time attaching it to everything. But yeah, it's a nice look if you want like a leafy plant, and yeah, it doesn't require much at all either, just a little bit of fertilization. Now the last plant is Certeyn. Now this is like not as well known as the other three that I mentioned, but it's the plant at the bottom here. It's hard to see because I'm filming this in the daytime, but it's kind of like a seaweed looking plant. Kind of weird looking actually. It's pretty unique. It will grow faster than most of the other plants in here, and just like all the other plants, you don't actually have to plant it in any like substrate, like planted tank substrate. So this whole tank, you could just use regular gravel or whatever. None of these plants are planted in the substrate. I do have Eco Complete in here, just because I used to have other plants that required substrate. But yeah, you could just use if you just have gravel sitting around, you don't even have to go out and buy Planet Tank substrate. So Certeyn, I'll get back to that. It requires very little, just low light, just like all the other plants. I use it in this tank specifically because it's kind of cool to use to create a carpet, because in low-tech tanks like this, it's really hard to find plants that will carpet, and even the ones that will, they're going to take forever. So what I do is I just kind of smoosh all of this down on top of the substrate, and it just sits there in like a mound, and you don't have to it won't float or anything, it'll stay there. And I just use that as my carpet almost, and it looks really good. The shrimp like it if you have them. But yeah, just another super easy plant. I mean, really all these plants will grow good for you if you give it a good light, some basic fertilizers, and that's about it. And remember, the key is to have a ton of plants in order to keep your maintenance really low. So that's about it for the plants. Let me know if you have any questions. And remember, you can swap out some of these plants, like the Certeyn. You could just use like another type of moss or something. There's different varieties of moss that you could use even instead. And yeah, so don't feel like you're limited to just these 4 plants. But I think these 4 really work well. And you can see in the setup they look well together. So we'll see you in the next video.